Coming up on Theater Talk.
To life.
To life.
L'chaim.
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 To life.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
Fiddler on the Roof. Sounds crazy, no? But now, little village around Atefka, you might say, every one of us is a fiddler on the roof, trying to scratch out a pleasant, simple tune without breaking his neck. It isn't easy. You may ask, why do we stay up there if it's so dangerous? We stay because Atefka's our home. How do we keep our balance? That I can tell you in one word. Tradition.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
And I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
We have a genuine Broadway legend on Theater Talk tonight. He wrote Fiddler on the Roof, She Loves Me, Tenderloin, FIORELLO. He is the great, great lyricist Sheldon Harnick. Welcome to Theater Talk, Sheldon. It's great.
Thank you, thank you.
The last time we had you on, it was just before the opening of the revival of Fiddler on the Roof with Alfred Molina. And you had Joe Stein, who wrote the book, and Jerry Bock, who wrote the music.
Right.
Both have died in the last year.
You're the last. Loss. Great loss.
You're the last of the Fiddler team.
I am, yeah. Jerome Robbins is gone too. Yeah.
I read somewhere that you said you feel like a widow when you lose someone like Jerry Bock and Joe, because you were so close, working so close all those years.
That's true. Also, when I began to write with other composers, I felt like I was cheating. It's like a marriage, yeah.
Yeah. What's it like now? You're one of the great older men of Broadway now, and so many people we've been losing. Arthur Lawrence we lost recently, Lanford Wilson. I mean, you feel this acutely? The whole world that you knew, that you worked in, is going.
I don't feel that way. I feel the loss of collaborators and friends, but otherwise, there are always new people to work with, and the youngsters keep coming along, and they're wonderful young people. So I don't feel quite that way.
Well, you guys were all from what's, I guess, we call the Golden Age of Broadway. I mean, to me, that's the Broadway sound, the sound that I grew up listening the cast albums that my grandmother had. Fiddler on the Roof, She Loves Me, all those wonderful songs. I wanted to ask you about Fiddler, since we lost Jerry and Joe. How did that show come together? I mean, whose idea was Fiddler on the Roof?
Somebody had sent me a book by Sholem Aleichem called Wandering Star. I don't remember who sent me the book, but I read it and I thought, I think there's a musical in this. I gave it to Jerry Bock, he read it, and we thought the right book writer for this would be Joe Stein. So we gave it to Joe to read. When he read it, he said, it's wonderful, but it is too big a canvas. It covers about 80 years. What makes it great are all the little characters. And we can't have a cast with 50 individual little characters. But he said, since we love the writing, let's see what else Sholem Aleichem has written. And we looked around and we found Tevye's Daughters. And as you know, they don't constitute a novel as such. They're all disparate stories. When we read those, we thought they are so rich. They are human. They have wonderful human humor, not jokey humor. And we thought this, if we do our job right, we could, and make a musical out of this. If we do our job right, then maybe we'll run a year or 2 years, but at least we'll have created something with artistic value. Yeah. You know, who knew?
I mean, I think one of the most successful musicals of all time. I think I read somewhere that there's always a production of Fiddler on the Roof somewhere in the world.
The sun never sets on it, or is that England? I forgot.
And when did Robbins come in, Jerome Robbins come into the picture, and how did he change the whole?
Jerry Robbins came in kind of late in the picture. We had our first director, and we went to, producer rather, was Harold Prince. And Hal told us it was not his cup of tea, But if I remember correctly, he said he thought we should approach Jerry Robbins with it. We went to Robbins, and Robbins loved it. We later found out that it had a very specific meaning for him. When Jerry Robbins was 6, his parents had taken him to Europe, to I think it was Poland, where his ancestors came from. And Jerry, even at the age of 6, found it a very emotional experience, he told us. And you can imagine what a sensitive 6-year-old Robbins must have been. During World War II, when he saw these little villages getting wiped out, exterminated, he was horrified because he thought the one he visited was probably one of those villages that was wiped out. So when we offered him Fiddler, for him it was the chance to put that whole culture on stage and give it an additional life of 25 years. And he was like a man obsessed to do that, So when we brought him the show, he loved what we had done, but what he missed, he said, there's nothing that indicates what gives those Sholem Aleichem stories their power. He said, this is an amusing plot, the father with his daughters who wants to marry them off, but the show has got to be about something more than that. And we had meeting after meeting after meeting, long before we went into rehearsal, and he always started the meeting by saying, what is this show about? And if any one of us said, well, it's about this milkman, he said, no, no, no. He said, that would be the previous adventures of the Goldberg family. It would be warm and funny, but that's not Fiddler. And then one day at one of those meetings, somebody said, hey, you know what this might be about? The changing of a way of life. As new ideas came in from the Enlightenment and got to these isolated villages, things began to change, traditions began to change. And at that point, Robbins' eyes lit up. He said, that's what it's about. And if that's what it's about, then we have to have an opening number that will show the audience what some of these traditions are. And so eventually we wrote.
But did you guys write lyrics, music first, or were you at the piano together, throwing out the ideas? How was it?
When I worked with Jerry, it's a way that I've never worked with any other composer. Once we knew what the source material was, Jerry would go into his studio and write music. And eventually he would send me a tape, and on the tape would be anywhere from 10 to 15 musical numbers, and he would preface each one by saying, I think this one is for the butcher, in such and such a scene, I think this one might be for Zeitl, I think this one, and so forth. And I would listen to them all, and on any tape, there were always at least one or two that just turned me on. I couldn't wait to write lyrics for them, whether they were the ideas that Jerry had or my own. And that's the way we always got started. At some point in the writing, I would have an idea where I thought, I don't want to be handcuffed by music. I want the freedom to write maybe a first chorus, and then I know when I write the second chorus, I may have to carpenter it and change the meters so that they're similar, and music would just be a hindrance. So I began to write lyrics first, and I was curious. I thought, I wonder if Jerry Bock can set music as well as give me music first. And when I gave him my first lyric and he gave it back to me, I thought, this is wonderful. Not only is it wonderful, but I thought of it as a waltz, and he's done it as something else, and it's better that way. You know? he was a superb musical drummer.
I have to ask you, though, you and Jerry Bock broke up. The partnership broke up. I mean, you were Bock and Harnick, the legends, Fiddler on the Roof, She Loves Me. You broke up over the Rothschilds. And you guys never talked about that breakup for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, what really happened was that Jerry trusted the director.
Of the Rothschilds.
Of the Rothschilds. He was a young Englishman, Derek Golby. And the rest of us felt that Derek was out of his depth. We felt he had never done a musical and that he'd kind of lost control of the show. But Jerry was his supporter and his backer. And eventually, the rest of us felt that Derek had to be replaced, and Jerry never forgave any of us for that.
And did you ever try to reconcile in all those years?
Oh, many times, many times. I had lunch with him once, and I said, Jerry, during the past year, I've seen 4 of our shows, and we have something very special. But by that time, Jerry had another agenda. Jerry is a very good lyricist. And when he started, he was his own lyricist. I think at the University of Wisconsin, he might have met the man, Larry Holofcener, who became his lyricist on Mr. Wonderful. But he wanted to write his own lyrics. And that was so that although we became friends again, he really did not want to work with another lyricist.
But Jerry never had a Broadway show after he split with you, did he?
No, he had a couple of experiences, shows that were meant to go to Broadway and they didn't work out. So, no, he had bad luck that way.
Yeah. Now, you began, if I'm not mistaken, in Chicago, right? You
That's
went to
right.
Northwestern.
I went to Northwestern.
And you were a jazz musician? Didn't you start as a jazz
Oh,
musician?
how I wish. No, I love jazz. No, I was a violinist, and I thought my dream was to be in the second violin section of some symphony orchestra. I never thought of myself as good enough to be in the first violin section.
But you were a serious classical?
I was a serious, yeah. I did play in dance bands around Chicago, especially to put myself through school along with the GI Bill. And then I had what at the time seemed like the worst imaginable luck, and it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. As a violinist in a dance band, we played the Edgewater Beach Hotel, which is a very posh place. And 5 nights a week, they would lower a microphone and we would broadcast dance music, 3 nights locally and 2 nights coast to coast. And I had very poor training as a violinist, so when that microphone came down, my shoulders began to tense up and I got very nervous. I was an anxious fiddle player. And by the end of the engagement, I could hardly move my arms. I went to a doctor and he said, "You have muscular and nervous exhaustion. You have to lay off for about a year, and I can't guarantee that your facility will come back then." And so I thought, oh my God, I can't play the violin for a year. I might as well go to New York and try and be a lyricist, which is the other thing that I had been thinking about.
And how did the lyric writing then come into play? Had you been, what, doing poems, scribbling things?
My mother always celebrated every bar mitzvah, every anniversary, every birthday with a poem. So my sister and I began to write poems. And it was wonderful seeing them published in the grammar school paper and the high school paper. And while I was in high school, I was introduced to a classmate whose family was involved in the little theater movement in Chicago. In fact, he even got me into one of their plays as an actor. And he wanted to write sketches and songs, and he introduced me to Kaufman and Hart and the playwrights. So we began to work together, and we wrote songs. That was the first time I'd written songs. But that broke up, that collaboration broke up when I was drafted. And then, by now I was writing songs. So while I was in the Army, I was writing songs about my Army experiences and performing them on Monday nights where I was stationed. We gave shows every Monday night.
Were you doing the music too?
I was doing the music too. And as it happened, the man who put those shows together had been an agent in civilian life. His name was Saul Lerner. And Saul said, "Listen, if we both come through this alive, and if you decide to go to New York and try and be in the entertainment business, look me up." And by the way, Saul's beautiful blonde girlfriend used to visit him from New York, and June. And when I finally did come to New York and I called Saul, I said, "Are you still an agent?" He said, "No." He said, "My wife is now the choreographer for Jackie Gleason, so June Taylor, so I'm just managing her." But he said, "You're an old Army buddy, so I will represent you." And he did. My life was changed, literally changed. I went to Northwestern to be a violinist, but also I went to Northwestern because they have a great student review, the WAMU show.
Yeah, sure.
And they have a wonderful talent pool. And the first year I was there, I submitted a song kind of based on my Army experiences. This was a woman working in a defense plant, and the title was, "I've Got Those Gotta Go Home Alone Tonight Blues." And the student who sang it was Charlotte Ray.
Ah, well.
So we became friends.
Yeah.
And about 3 years later, I think it was around 1948, Charlotte had gone to New York on the Christmas vacation. And when she came back, she sought me out with an LP in her hand and said, "Sheldon, you got to hear this." So she loaned me the album To Finian's Rainbow. And when I listened to it and when I heard Yip Harburg's lyrics, I thought, oh my God, listen to what that man is doing. They're so playful, they're so imaginative, and he's making social commentary, but you listen because it's done so wittily. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to change my career. I don't want to be a violinist anymore. I want to be a musical theater writer.
Where did you meet Jerry Bock?
We were introduced by Jack Cassidy.
Oh, I love Jack Cassidy, one of my favorite actors of all time.
I was called in to try and repair lyrics or do new lyrics if any were necessary on a show called Shangri-La. I got called in. I met Jack Cassidy. And Jack said, "You have to meet Jerry Bock because he's broken up with his lyricist and he's looking for a new lyricist." So Jack and also my publisher, Jerry's publisher, Tommy Valando, introduced us, and a miracle happened. Two young men who have never written anything together do not get hired to do a Broadway musical.
Yeah.
And we were. The Body Beautiful, we'd never written anything together.
The Body Beautiful was not a hit, though. It was.
It was not a hit. And thank God, Steve Sondheim had seen it and called Hal Prince and said, "You've got to see this show." And Hal came, and he introduced himself to Jerry and me and said, "Someday I want to work with you guys," which was great because, you know, the show was dying. And Hal came through. A year later, he was doing FIORELLO, and he hired Jerry. He didn't hire me because they thought, they being Hal and his partner at that time, Bobby Griffiths, they thought the book writers they went to might want to do their own lyrics. So they didn't hire a lyricist. And they went to several, and that turned out to be the case. And the last one they went to was Jerome Weidman, who also wanted to do his own lyrics. Jerry was keeping me in touch with what was going on, and he said, "Well, Jerome Weidman just sent me a lyric." He said, "It's like a novel." He said "It's at least as long as Beowulf." So Hal Prince and Bobby Griffiths told Jerry Weidman, they said, "We love your dramatic scenes. We do not think you're cut out to be a lyricist." And at that time, they contacted Jerry and me and two other young teams, because George Abbott, the director, loved working with young people. So Hal contacted us. I think there were 3 or maybe 4 teams. He told us, he gave us a copy of the book that existed at that time, and he said, "I'd like you to try writing songs for these 4 spots on spec." We didn't get paid, but it was just a wonderful opportunity. So Jerry and I, like the other guys, we wrote our 4 songs, and we won. We got hired.
And that was.
That was FIORELLO. I have to tell you, this is a story that I treasure. We were doing the songs for Hal in his apartment. And we had done, the first one was the strike song, and they loved that. Then we did the other 2 that they didn't like. And I thought, oh my God.
You could feel that they're not liking it.
I could feel they're not liking it. Then we did Till Tomorrow. And I made the mistake of looking in Hal's eyes when I sang it. And when I got to one of the lines, which was like a lace valentine, it was so uncharacteristic of the way that I wrote, because Hal thought of me as somebody who wrote edgy review material. And when I sang this 1917 sentimental song, and I was looking at him, when I finished, he said, "That's a put-on. That nobody can take that seriously." I said, "No, Hal, no, that's meant to sound like Irving Berlin, 1917." He said, "No, that's you're kidding, and that won't work." And thank God, Bobby Griffith said, "Hal, this sounds exactly like those songs. You're not old enough to remember those songs, but I do." And so they're going head to head, and I'm thinking, oh, I hope Bobby wins. And suddenly there's a ring at the door. The doorbell rings, and Hal said, "This is Pete Gennaro, our choreographer. Don't anybody say anything." So Pete came in, and he said, "Pete, this is the song for the going away party. Fellas, play the song." So we played the song, and at the end of it, Pete said, "Oh, that's 1917. That's Irving Berlin. It's perfect." And Hal looked at me and said, "Okay, kid, you got the job." I love that story.
We have a special treat. We have a special treat for you tonight. Sheldon has agreed to sing, despite the performance anxiety that you had as the violinist back. You're going to sing for us with the beautiful Kate Baldwin, who was nominated for a Tony a few years ago for Finian's Rainbow.
I got very lucky. Kate told me that she wanted to do an evening of my songs. And since I just loved her work, I thought, oh, how lucky can a guy get? And then she said, "Will you be my guest? And come in towards the end of the show, we'll do a couple of duets together, you'll do a solo." So we did. And it was wonderful fun.
And this is L'Chaim. Can you just give us the story behind
It's called To Life.
To Life, yeah.
Yeah, and it comes from the spot in Fiddler on the Roof where Tevye and the butcher have agreed that the butcher is to marry Tevye's oldest daughter. And so they do this song where they're toasting each other, L'Chaim, to life.
And we should also say that there's a CD coming out, Kate Baldwin's CD, with your songs.
Right, we recorded the song at Feinstein's. We recorded it live, and I believe it's coming out, the CD is coming out in July.
And it's called?
She had the idea of calling the act She Loves Him.
That's very good.
And there's a photograph of her loving me.
Oh, wow, you can't go wrong with Kate Baldwin.
She's so beautiful, and she's a beautiful woman, too. She's just the loveliest person.
And we haven't even gotten to talking about She Loves Me, so you'll have to come back and talk about that.
I'll be happy to.
All right.
All right.
To Life with Kate Baldwin and Sheldon Harnick.
To
life.
L'chaim,
L'chaim
l'chaim.
to life.
Life has a way of confusing us, blessing and bruising us.
Drink l'chaim
to life,
to life.
l'chaim,
L'chaim
l'chaim.
to life. If you've been lucky, then Monday was no worse than Sunday was.
Drink l'chaim to life. Our great men have written words of wisdom to be used when hardship must be faced.
Life obliges us with hardship, so the words of wisdom shouldn't go to waste. To us and our good fortune,
Be happy,
be healthy,
long life. And if our good fortune never comes, here's to whatever comes.
drink l'chaim
To life,
to life.
l'chaim,
L'chaim
l'chaim.
to life.
One day it's honey and raisin cake, next day a stomach ache.
Drink l'chaim
To life,
to life.
l'chaim,
L'chaim
l'chaim.
to life. Here's to the ruble you find by chance inside your winter pants. Drink l'chaim to life.
God would like us to be joyful, even when our hearts lie panting on the floor.
How much more can we be joyful when there's really something to be joyful for? To life, l'chaim. L'chaim, l'chaim to life. A gift we seldom are wise enough.
Ever to prize enough.
Drink l'chaim
L'chaim
to life.
Musically, Jerry, what was the style that you?
There was not one song in the original Sholem Aleichem story.
Your contribution.
Okay.
Did you hear the sound of the music, so to speak, as soon as you were reading these?
You know, it's hard to explain, but I guess I grew up all my life favoring the minor key in terms of classical music, in terms of folk music, in terms of even little songs my grandmother used to sing me. But I never had the opportunity to express that musically in any of the shows we did. And when this opportunity arrived, it was like a fountain that was starting to run.
Are there scenes you wrote that then became songs in the show?
Inevitably, that always happens, or parts of scenes,
Yeah.
or parts of dialogue. But that's, the word for that is collaboration.
Lord, who made the lion and the lamb, you decreed I should be what I am. Would it spoil some vast eternal plan if I were a wealthy man?
The New York Drama Critics Circle is about to get a new member. He is Donald Lyons of the Wall Street Journal, and he's rapidly earning a reputation as someone who does not stand for the political correctness raging in the New York theater. Donald, welcome. I should also say you are the author of Independent Visions, a book about independent filmmaking in America. You're a conservative. Mm-hmm. Do you find political correctness run amok in the New York theater?
Oh, I think it's I think it's a pervading smog in the New York theater. But I think that's true in show business in general. I think it takes a really special spirit these days to not create, to not write from those points of view.
A real radical play would be one about celebrating the life and times of Jesse Helms.
No, I don't think the answer to one kind of poison is not another kind of poison. The answer is just a genius who would come out of his or her own heart. Look at Eugene O'Neill, who for decades wrote trendy plays in which Freudianism was on stage, or myth was on stage, or racial consciousness was on stage. Then in his late and very ill old age, spent a summer writing about his childhood, about his family, and produced the greatest American play ever written. There's a lesson in that. I think what's great comes from the heart, comes from the life lived, or if you will, the brain, and not from whatever ideas are in the air.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.